Welcome. It has just gone 4:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday the 23rd of August, and you are watching episode 101 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, the Bush Summit 2023, the review, is my guest, Zach Garven, Acting Executive Member of Advance Rockhampton, who attended the final event in Rockhampton on the 18th of August. Welcome, Zach.
Hey, g'day, Bill. Thank you so much, Bill, for the welcome. It's great to join you.
Matthew's just coming on. So we'll just wait for Matthew to come in. Andrew, do you want
to... Matthew, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we're just waiting for your video. We've just started going live, Matthew. So,
do you want to start it again? Start the record again, or you just pull
no,
the second one?
No, you're right, Bill. Just continue on.
Okay.
Okay.
And also joining us is Matthew Sweeney. He is the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Tamworth and was a participant or a visitor of the first Bush Summit starting off in Tamworth. So welcome, Matthew.
Hi, Bill.
And welcome again, Zach.
G'day, Bill, and g'day, Matthew. Great to meet you across Zoom today.
Hi, Zach. How are you?
So,
if we could just start off, if you'd like to just give us a quick brief again, Matthew, on your background, and we'll throw over to Zach for a bit of his background, and then we'll look at the start off of the Bush Summit in Tamworth, and basically the expectations or the preparations both in Tamworth and Rockhampton, and then the events themselves, and basically the wash up of the Bush Summit. So if you could take it away, Matthew.
Yeah,
Matthew?
Sure. So my background, I'm the president of the Tamworth Business Chamber, and I'm also involved in the New South Wales Business Chamber as well. I'm a chartered accountant, lots of sort of businesses locally as clients, and yeah, we're invited as along to the Bush Summit here in Tamworth a couple of weeks ago now. Just to sort of participate, and prior to that, well, just prior to the Bush Summit, we had a few sort of discussions with various ministers and participants in the Bush Summit as to what was happening in and around Tamworth.
Okay then. Over to you, Zach.
So, Zach Garven, I'm the Acting Executive Manager of Advance Rockhampton. So Advance Rockhampton is Rockhampton Regional Council's Economic Development unit. We work across many different sectors, tourism and events, but also agriculture, aquaculture, local content, renewables, defence, and also, just a full disclosure, we were also a local sponsor of the Bush Summit that was came to town last Friday. It was, look, having the conversation about regional Australia in regional Australia is the number one thing that I was excited for. These sort of summits, if they were to happen in capital cities, talking about the bush is not the way to kick it off. So first of all, it was so great to have the opportunity to have it in Rockhampton, and yeah, I look forward to discussing my thoughts with you across our chat today.
Thank you. With Matthew, if you could just give us a bit of the preparations within the township of Tamworth, business involvement, and the basically the enthusiasm before the event.
Look, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm to start with, but yes, it was coming to Tamworth. The council was sort of contacted and asked whether they could use one of the council sites, which holds about 1,000 people, but they acknowledged that there was only going to be probably a couple of hundred, which was right. There was probably a couple of hundred there on the day. The expression of interest was sent out, not to everyone. It was sort of a select group that was directly invited, and then obviously people could submit their questions for that were specific to Tamworth, but also the regions themselves. Some of those got answered, some of them didn't, or I should say answered. Some of them got recognised as questions. Some of them didn't get answered at all. But yeah, it was sort of. I think it was most people sort of recognised that. Look, it was new people coming to Tamworth that probably hadn't seen that region, our region, before. There were discussions had for various different issues. I guess the follow up now is whether any of that results in any change or any further announcements, hopefully in the near future.
Was that similar for you, Zach? You had a fair bit of notice beforehand, and you had a few idea of who was coming, and also who you needed to have at the summit on behalf of Rockhampton.
Yeah, certainly. We work really closely with News Corp, who brought the Bush Summit to life. I suppose one of the great things is the locations that the options that we had put forward when we were assisting them choose a location. The final one that they went with is the Great Western Hotel, which is a pub that's in the middle of town that actually has a rodeo rink inside it that can hold up to a couple of thousand people. So to hold the Bush Summit in a country pub on top of a rodeo rink is pretty spectacular. In terms of the speakers, we had opportunities to put forward and to also weigh in on what that looked like from being the local government. And we're very privy to some of the speakers that they had lined up right across as that emerged. Yeah.
So you also had a chance to talk to them outside of the arena, as you might put it. So who within Rockhampton had the best opportunity to twist their ears?
Well, some of the elected members that were coming through, there was some dinners that happened the day before, but I suppose that the best thing is to have these conversations in person and to have, we had the Premier attend ours as well as a lot of other members of Parliament, and to be able to engage with those people, over a cuppa and discuss the opportunities for the region is also great, because sometimes having these discussions face to face, in a capital city, or sometimes, over a telephone call or a Zoom, isn't as important as doing it face to face, which those opportunities were certainly there.
And what about in Tamworth, Matthew? Was there an opportunity? Who had the best opportunity to twist ears and be seen and heard?
Look, there in our situation, each of the politicians that spoke sort of left the meeting fairly quickly thereafter, and then went off and did farm visits or site visits with select individuals, particularly from council. A lot of our guest speakers were, not the politicians, and there was really only, 2 or 3 actual local individuals on stage. So it was sort of, we found that a little bit sort of interesting as to who was invited as a guest presenter and who wasn't. But we had the Peter Dutton, as well as the Prime Minister Albanese. Then we had sort of our local the state member Chris Minns was there. They were there the night before, although Anthony Albanese wasn't there the night before. But even the night before, there was lots of people in the room, but not a lot of activity in mingling. It was sort of, go to dinner, have a quick chat beforehand. And then the next day it was sort of, there wasn't a lot of Q&A that was presented. Look, we weren't expecting a lot in terms of Q&A. It was clearly a News Corp event. That they picked the topics. They presented the communique at the end in terms of what they wanted out of it. A lot of that was sort of fed back to local people, and I guess we're just sort of now waiting on the outcomes for that. Luckily, this week we've now had AgQuip, which is out in Gunnedah. So we also had a lot of politicians come through Tamworth for that. So I was dinner with a group of them on Monday night, then back down in Sydney again yesterday with follow-up meetings still coming through.
Oh, well, I can only hope some good things come out of it somewhere along the line. In Tamworth, you had Mr. Giles speak on behalf of Hancock Prospecting and Agricultural, and in Rockhampton, you actually got the big boss, Gina, who I saw her interview in Perth at the Bush Summit, and it was an impromptu one, probably about 13 or 14 minutes. But you got the full dose in Rockhampton. I think it was 27 minutes. I don't know if it was as polished as some of the other presenters, but it did have a down-to-earth tone compared to a lot of the speakers. So how did you find, Matthew, the non-political representatives in visiting you, and how did they interact with the local community?
Look, I think each of them identified certain issues in regional Australia, whether that be from health. The gentleman from Bayer mentioned. We also had Woolworths CEO. He was mentioning sort of remote working and how that works with their sort of cohort within Woolworths. And then we had Adam Giles mention he was obviously reading certain notes and then went off script a couple of times. But
was he misled? Was he dragged away from topic, or he just went off topic?
He went off topic, particularly on the night before. But look, it was a lot of our conversations seemed to be very much linked with the renewable energy, and more so with the cabling and the wires, and the transmission grid itself seemed to get raised quite a number of times in our conversations. Whereas there was a little bit of conversation about housing, a little bit of conversation about health and teacher shortages and all the rest of it. But I don't think they're unique to Tamworth per se. My main takeaway was, they've all recognised these as being issues that they can now no longer turn around and say, "Oh, we weren't aware of it." They've recognised it in their own speeches. So let's see what what are the outcomes to try and fix it.
Yeah, at least it gives you an avenue to follow up on.
Yes.
And what about you, Zach? The non-political speakers, how did you find them and the engagement outside of the Bush Summit?
Yeah, look, I found the non-political speakers to be great. My favourite session was the technology and connectivity panel that they spoke. That had Kate Jones, the ex-political person, but now she's the Exec Director of Tech Council of Australia, Bryce Cam, Chairman of Beef Australia, Julie Spicer, the Queensland Chief Entrepreneur. She was my favourite panellist for the whole day, and then we had an elected member as well. So I feel that the conversations and those panel conversations that happened, you had a broad range of panellists that each were subject matter experts in their own field, and each had a diverse upbringing as well. And so the authenticity that they brought with their answers, and I'm sure that they had the questions in advance and they could sort of harmonize on what the answers would be, but their answers were also diverse and authentic for what regional Australia needs, and certainly for what Rockhampton and regional Queensland needs.
Yeah, the thing that interests me in regards to the Bush Summit and the way they address it, I still don't believe they recognise the powerhouse that the regions are, the wealth they create, and the potential for growing the pie. And I think that's the thing that they come to these summits, but they don't sort of focus on those things. They recognise some of it, but let's face it, after COVID and all the stuff that went on with COVID, and then you look at the pickup in Australian exports and what the regions contribute to the GDP in regards to, if it wasn't for iron ore coming out of West Australia in the north, and if it wasn't for coal coming out of Queensland, and then all over right from regional Queensland, the agricultural project thing, we're exporting somewhere in the vicinity of $400 million worth of product a year. And that's not coming out of Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne. That's coming out of the regions. And I don't think the Bush Summit has really got that in focus in regards to what we can do to grow the regions, to grow Australia. I still think they miss that point.
And perhaps that can be a recommendation as a whole panel for next year's Bush Summit. I was really proud that all of the issues and opportunities that they raised also reflected what our internal Rockhampton region and economic development strategy and action plan have identified. And some of the challenges that we have, like housing and trying to get some professional services based here. But a big part of the summit was around livability. And my favourite person, the Julie Spicer, the Queensland Chief Entrepreneur, I actually forget where she lives. I think it's Dalby or it's somewhere regional in Queensland. And she said, I'm not a tree. I'm not forced to live there. I choose to live there. And you can live in the regions and still be the state's chief, whatever you'd like to be. You can still enjoy all the benefits of regional Australia and regional Queensland living, whether it be the people, whether it be the connectivity to nature, whether it be less traffic, whether it be affordability. Like I certainly know for me, the house that I've purchased, my friends that live in Sydney, my total purchase price is what their deposit is. And so the access to be able to, own a home, to be able to, live and feel part of a community, we have that in spades in the regions. And I think we have to play to those strengths when we're looking at attracting people to move here, when we're looking at that, Rockhampton being a great place to live, visit and invest, because that's not just about the companies, it's about the people as well.
I agree with that, Zach. One of the things that I sort of took out of the summit, and it's probably linked then to obviously who was pushing it, which was News Corp. It's nice to have the politicians here, but at the end of the day, we can either let things happen to us in the regions, or we can make them happen. And by expecting the politicians to to stroke the pen, do things that we want. Well, it's a bit of a foolish idea if that's what we want. We can make things happen. And I look at this sort of Bush Summit opportunity is, more people are going to probably read a News Corp article or see it online or listen in to some of the people you've just mentioned and your mentioned there, Zach, then they're not going to listen to a politician's speech in Parliament. So we saw that as our biggest opportunity to showcase what Tamworth is capable of. I had a few guest speakers who sort of mention what it's like living in regional and in our case Tamworth, and that's what I see the value of the Bush Summit. If all we're doing is focusing on the impact of the politicians, it's probably a lot of people move to the regions to get away from that aspect, and make the region your own. And that's what we had a few sessions in and around the Bush Summit, and particularly with renewable energy. And that was a comment we kept on saying to businesses: you can either sit back and let it happen to you and then take whatever's given, or you can pony up and actually get involved and make it your own and deliver something for what you want. And if we're just expecting the politicians to come to town and tell us what we want, then you're probably going to be bitterly disappointed.
I suppose the thing is too is although we want to make things happen, there's some basics that need to be put in place and can't be put in place without the government doing it, going infrastructure and things like that. It's essential that they're on board, and not just on board, but just delivering the things that they should be delivering anyway, like better roads, better conductivity in the road network, of course, hospitals and those sort of things. But it really is, it's still a matter of regionals having to really jump up and down and, put out the message there all the time. It's not a natural progression of Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne or Canberra even doing the forward planning. It's really, I found in Cairns, it's basically the councils trying to get the message out what we need, whereas we have these departments of development, both in federal and state. Well, you think they'd have a strategic plan that would, all right, this is going to grow. So we've got to upgrade this area. So we've got to upgrade it from a goat track to a decent highway. But that doesn't seem to come at the pace that it should. And then you also hear, since post-COVID and things like the push for more immigration and that the regions are going to get more people. There's got to, of course, they got to still go. A lot of people still got to go to Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. But there is a sort of concerted effort to sort of focus a little bit on moving people to the regions. And we've got things like people talking about Cairns, getting up towards 200,000 people by 2040. But we know up here we haven't got the water infrastructure to cater for another 30 or 40,000 people or 50,000 people in 15 years, because we just haven't. We've got to suck water out of the Mulgrave River for the next 15 years. But that's the plan. But we know that's got to only last 15 years, even under the current conditions. So add another 40,000 people to Cairns. Well, that's not going to last that long. So where's the strategic plan? And I think that must be for a lot of cities, that they don't see this long-term strategic plan. It's just somewhere in a budget, you'll get some project will get a lot of funding, and then you just have to wait till the next lot of funding for something else. Do you think this is a bit of a problem? There isn't a strategic plan for regional Australia, really?
I know that here locally in Tamworth, our local council has got that strategic plan, where we call it the Blueprint 100. If we get to 100,000 people, we can either let it happen, as I mentioned, which will be probably 2050, or we can put inside the infrastructure to make it happen, and it'll probably happen by 2040 or earlier. And it's a matter of then keep going back to both the state and federal government saying this is the next thing on our agenda. And I guess it's, at the moment, the governments are passing the costs back down the chain, and it's much trying to reverse that. But things like the Bush Summit, I guess, when they're coming to the towns, they realise that it is actually a concerted effort. It's not just the councils asking for this, it's all the businesses backing the council and saying, well, hey, we want this too. And at the end of the day, the politicians are all going to be about votes. And, if they can see that, hey, look, there are quite a lot of people in these towns that are passionate about this, and they will vote accordingly, then maybe we'll sort of realise it. I mean, I'm sort of not being foolish to recognise that, with 65,000 people in Tamworth, our vote up here is probably less than what it would be, say, in Western Sydney, which is a hell of a lot more people. But the more that we can show that those 65,000 people are all pointing in the right direction and wanting the same thing, maybe it does result in a different outcome.
I think everyone's got a strategic plan. All the regions. I know we've got a far north regional plan, and Cairns Council's got a plan. But I've read some of them, and some of them need updating, and that they are updated on, I think it's about a 14-year or 17-year basis, I think, a lot of them, but they still don't give focus on any big projects or big ticket items that will deliver wealth creation. They're just catch up of deliveries of things that you would expect with that population. How do you find that, Zach, down in Rockhampton? I'm sure you've got a local sort of plan, and is it in a lot of cases still the state government trying to catch up to provide some of that, or is it being satisfied?
Well, we do have a plan. We endorsed it in late January this year. It's a 5-year plan, and it identifies across 5 different pillars. So there's future jobs and investment attraction, infrastructure for future growth, regional promotion and major events, regional collaboration and partnership, and then that talent retention and attraction. And it looks at taking 3 metrics that we want to measure, which is our GRP, how many jobs, and our population. And so across those growth sectors, the defence, agriculture and water, transport and logistics, professional services, the visitor economy and major events, energy and mining services, and that residential construction. Across all those pillars for our plan, this 5-year plan, and we almost made it a 3-year plan just because the future can change very quickly. But our 5-year plan has some very achievable but also ambitious targets that will take us out to 2041. And so for this plan that was endorsed by our council here, we did some significant engagement with not only local businesses. So there was about 500 local businesses that were engaged with, but 1,500 local residents here as well about what was important to them and what they thought. And then we worked in collaboration with some economic partners with AEC to do this plan. And the good thing about this plan is it's not just one for our local government, but it's also one for our local businesses, our local population, but it also blends across to that state government and federal government as well. And so to answer your question around, do we have the state government plan for us? We have a plan that the state government can play into. And as we launch up our different projects across the next 5 years, we use this economic development strategy and action plan as our blueprint for everything that we do. And we've already seen our GRP go from 5.5 to 5.7, and our employment at the moment is at an all-time low of 4.1%. So what we're looking at, where our opportunities are, is how do we get more people to move to the regions? And to do that, we need a lot more housing here as well.
Other big projects that you'd like to happen to your areas? I mean, there's always been a thing with Rockhampton and the bypass and the floodways and things like that. There's been quite probably haven't heard much of it in the last couple of years, but about 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the flood levies and things like that, and making sure that situation was in place. Are they the sort of big projects that need to happen, just not only just to protect your current infrastructure, but to also so you can plan out your new infrastructure and planning where you can put new suburbs and businesses and things like that? Because you do have a lot of flat, low-lying land to the west of your city that sometimes is a bit of a worry for a floodplain.
If I took major projects, the ones that I'm talking about are like our Rockhampton Ring Road. So that is the third bridge and a ring road to get some of that heavy haulage out through driving through our CBD. Looking at our defence, so we've got our Australia-Singapore Military Training Initiative up at Shoalwater Bay. So, Singapore has invested $1 billion in that project, updating that. And defence is a really large part of our growth, both from population, GRP, and jobs as well. Then looking at Rookwood Weir, our water, that's nearing completion, and that project is a $367 million project. And water, that beautiful Fitzroy-Toonabar River that runs right through the city, that water is our lifeblood. From our Making Water Work projects, we now have companies like Rural Funds Management planting 1 million macadamia trees. Still looking at coal and certainly metallurgical coal as well. That Bowen and Galilee Basin, it represents the resource coal industry represents about 30% of our employment in our local region. Still on that resources sector, we have our Mount Morgan gold mine that is about to reopen, and looking, there's billions of dollars worth of gold, copper, and also pyrite that is still up there in what was, I think it still is, the richest gold mine ever to be in Australia. And when that was the turn of the last century, when that kicked off, the guy that created that, William Knox Darcy, he went on to create BP, British Petroleum. And so that mine has laid dormant for the last 20 years. And there's a company now, Heritage Minerals, that's looking at kicking that off as well. So, when I talk major projects, there's some really significant things happening here, and where our opportunity is, and what Advance Rockhampton is really laser focused on in our strategy is, how do we ensure that we have a local jobs pipeline so that all of our existing local businesses can get that chunk of pie for all of those different projects, and that we don't let those jobs go to fly by night people that just come in and do that concrete job, or supply that part of steel or whatever it might be, that we get local manufacturing and local suppliers to do that, and that's what we're focused on right now.
And in Tamworth, Matthew, you got similar sort of goals in regards to infrastructure and specific projects that to help your region, or to grab the attention of citizens in Sydney and coming up your way?
Look, we're probably sitting around the same size, plus or minus a few thousand as where Rockhampton is as well. But listening to Zach and his sort of commentary there on, those infrastructure, squeeze points, water, same thing here in Tamworth, having the water, both for potable water for drinking, but also the environmental flows and those for agriculture. We've got a fairly substantial agricultural market here, and getting those environmental flows right is critical as well. And housing, we've got the renewable energy zone just beside us, basically, here in Tamworth, and so we're working fairly tight timeframes at the moment to get both the staff, the skills, and the housing involved in that, but recognizing that in sort of 5 to 10 years time, once those farms are completed, that there is still work then for those, particularly the trades element of it, that there's still work there for them when those projects are built, and they're all we're working, both the chamber and the councils are working collectively to try and make sure that they don't all come online at the same day, that they're nicely scheduled to make sure that we can get the right number of people in town at the right times. But the infrastructure, roads, rail, we're doing some rail works at the moment, and for us, the water's the biggest one. So getting the people into town with no water causes a bit of a problem.
Well, I think that's always the way, and especially when you have itinerants come through, or tourists and that, they use a lot of water because they're paying it for it in the accommodation, so they're not paying for the water directly. It's just built into their accommodation. Because I know when I go on holidays, I tend to have a long shower or whatever, and don't really think about the water because I'm paying a couple $100 a night accommodation. So what sort of, say over the next 5 years, what sort of targets as far as population growth do you think Tamworth and could handle before it got into some serious issues with things like water or other infrastructure?
Look, at the moment, so last year, I think we brought in about 800 net positive. we're probably expecting, net positive about 1,000 this year. But looking at the recent reports from News Corp, I think 250,000 people through their most recent survey were indicating they are definitely moving to regional towns somewhere in Australia. And you'd be looking at saying, well, if only 1% of them was to move to Tamworth, it's going to beat, previous year's records. So we just need to be ready for it. There's a fair bit of new land subdivisions happening right now. Obviously, by the time the builders actually finish building those, but for you're probably 3 or 4 years off. But I always look at that as an innovation opportunity to say, well, there's got to be different ways to build, whether that's manufactured homes as opposed to traditional bricks and mortar. We know that we had previously had issues with from the water side of things. Dungowan Dam looks like it's been knocked on the head from an environmental flow there. So we're now looking at okay, what's an alternative? Our sort of protein processors, the abattoirs and the like, use a lot of water, so we're looking at alternatives for them in recycling. Look at what other opportunities are there to create new industries that currently don't exist. And I think that's where regional Australia comes into its own, because if it's not going to be delivered, in traditional ways, we'll find an alternative that'll still work.
I think the thing is too, with the planned ramping up of migration that's been touted by the federal government, a lot of those people are going to be heading, of course, into Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and they'll rather be there. And I think that's probably going to force more people out of there who are the normal residents or the long-term residents of Brisbane, Melbourne City. So I think all of regional Australia have to expect a reasonable amount of movement from Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane people to a little bit further out, basically because the livability will change, because I think Melbourne would be a great place and very livable if it got rid of 1 million people. It would be a bit easier to get around. And I'm sure that goes for a lot of the other cities and that. But how do you see Rockhampton, Zach, as far as a spin-off from the push in net migration and people, and how many people do you think you handle over, say, a 5-year period?
I don't know how many people we could handle in a 5-year period, but I've got some thoughts on this. So the first one is, I think we have a housing density problem. And so, and this is typically a regional Australian issue. So we have, I use my mum as an example. She's in her late 60s, 29. And she had an empty nester, and she lived in a 5-bedroom house that raised our family through our life. Now, mum was very open and willing to downsize and go into a smaller 2-bedroom cottage and let a larger family fill up that home. And so if you look at housing density, you have a lot of empty nesters that are still in their family home that might be 5 bedrooms, and they're just using 1 bedroom. And so if we were to flip that around and when you're at that stage of life, look at moving into an apartment, or maybe look at moving into a smaller home. If we just shuffled the people that lived in the different sized homes, we would fix a lot of our housing problems. Now, if you look regionally, so like our median age here in Rockhampton is 37. If I look at my friends that have young children, they want to live in a home with a yard and a dog and place for the kids to run around. But I also grew up in Brisbane, and a lot of my mates in Brisbane, they grew up in apartments as a kid. And so they that was normal for them. But if I asked friends here in regional Australia, would you ever, live in an apartment with a young family, it would be no. And so it's around those expectations, but also luxuries that you get living in regional Australia. But if we look at that housing density, just in terms of who lives in a house, and changing that, if we swapped homes for a lot of empty nesters, if they were happy to, that would be the first way that we could fix some of the housing problems. Then you've got a little bit of a building construction crisis going on with the housing, and looking at how we do that sustainably, and that's going to have growth that is achievable and steady, and you're not entering into some sort of boom bust way. But certainly for us, we have some great population increase targets that we're looking at. From 82,000 last year, we've increased by about 1,000 net positive over the last 12 months. But we're looking out to just beyond 150,000 over the next couple of years. But a lot of that has to come down to housing density, housing availability, and housing pricing as well.
I think the thing is too, just because we're out in the regions, people think we can spread out everywhere too, but that's not true. There is a lot of barriers in regards to the way the landmass is shaped. Like in Cairns, we can only go north and south along the Great Divide, so we're limited. We have issues. The council has problems with not in our backyard mentality. You've got people in the beach suburbs, it's an old suburbs. They want to keep it, the high rises there. But then those same people, are asking for light rail and things like this. Well, public transport can't operate unless there's a density light rail. You have to have, 3 and 4 story apartments and that borders with those transport corridors. So some people can choose to live there, and if you want to live out, well, you can come in and connect to those. But in Tamworth, I've never sort of envisaged you'd be restricted for new land developments of those. But do you have but you'd also want infill as well. Is that part of the plan in both Tamworth and Rockhampton, a little bit of infill?
Look, we've got sort of limited infill space, particularly close to town, and I guess in regional towns, the transport infrastructure. There's not a train between the different sort of boroughs, if you like, or little sort of areas. If you don't have a car, you're very reliant on the bus network, as to where it runs. But in terms of our area, it's sort of our average population is just above 40 at the moment. It's a bit of an hourglass figure. You've got a lot of younger sort of children. Then those people obviously head off to university or head off to other jobs when they reach mid-20s, and then they appear to come back when they're sort of probably mid-30s to 40s. Some of them are coming off the land by the time they get a little bit older, but they're used to acreage, and then don't really want to come back down to a apartment block. There's not many high-rise apartment blocks in Tamworth as a result. Long term, that may change. There's probably more in the planning with university sort of style accommodation, but I think in our area it's there's a new series of properties being released over the next probably 6 months. They're reducing in size than what would have been even accepted probably 5 years ago. They're no longer the quarter acre block. They're allowing them to be a bit smaller to get more people in there, but also recognising the fact that the further we spread out, the more infrastructure is required from a transport perspective, and we've got to then get both the electricity and the water and all the other infrastructure further out.
Yeah, that certainly adds to the cost of estates and that the infrastructures that the developers have got to put in there, especially when you're talking about things like sewage. I mean, it's no longer the sort of acceptable standard old quarter-acre block with a septic tank or that anymore.
No, they're all expecting to be sewered, NBN connection, powered, all the rest of it's expected, even on the larger blocks. But of course, if you're a developer and you've got to average those prices over the larger blocks, it pushes the prices up. At the same time, they're trying to get affordable housing, or housing that is affordable, not necessarily social housing, but if you're one development we're doing here at the moment, touted about 1,500 lots. If they were to do bigger lot sizes, they might only get 800. But of course, you've got to average your building costs across that. So suddenly the block prices are priced out of the affordability for people locally.
And Zach, in Rockhampton, is there sort of areas sort of where you restricted from building because of floodplains and things like that limits options, or you've got both? Because Rockhampton also suits itself for a little bit of high rise. I mean, it's got some hotels and that's a reasonable size, but it has the CBD layout that could easily handle some high rise. And I mean, of course, you always got to have trouble in the suburbs getting any sort of multi-story or medium density dwellings put in, but I suppose really you can, through reasonable presentation and argument, especially with affordability, at least get some of these sort of denser dwelling areas in.
If you look at, and I suppose Rockhampton would be very similar to Tamworth, we have choice. If you want a quarter-acre block or a 30-acre property, we have those as well. If you look at cost of apartments versus homes, so our apartment median price is about double that of a house. And that's because most of our high-rises are actually on the riverfront. So they're sort of like luxury high-rise apartments as opposed to suburban medium density little high-rises. And that's just purely from their position and their prestige. But our CBD does, there's some impressive high rises that are up there. There's some impressive award-winning hotels. The Empire Apartment Hotel here just won the best hotel in all of Australia in the 4.5-star category at last year's Australian Tourism Awards. I think the regions punch above their weight, and from a livability, like I'm building at the moment in a high rise in the CBD because I'm okay with living in an apartment. It offers security and safety and the ability to lock up and travel and come back, and everything looks just the same. But then I also miss mowing the yard because that's something that I really love doing. So
I've got a big block up there. You can go and mow that if you like. Yeah. Just on that. With downsizing we were talking about before, the government does have incentive for people to anything necessary to downsize and that. Do you think that's any help there is get more information about it?
But potentially, I think a lot of it's around stigma. And if you the generation above me, a lot of times they may have grown up in one family home and stayed in there for a long time. Younger generations may be used to moving quite often, but there's an attachment to a property that's like, I raised a family here, this is where a lifetime of memories are, and I might not need the other 4 bedrooms or the rumpus room or the studio or the quarter-acre block to mow, but this is my family home and I don't want to move anywhere else, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that couple or person did want to move somewhere smaller, downsize, and let a growing family move into that, that would certainly help some of those housing problems.
With what about in Tamworth? Do you see things like as things improve in Tamworth and it gets more attractive, that you'll be because you have the Tamworth Music Festival, it brings a lot of people through into Tamworth. Do you think as time goes by, as Tamworth grows, and the fact that people come there and see it so regularly, see it as an option in the future to move to? And for Rockhampton, Zach, is there something that happens in Rockhampton regularly enough to get those sort of regular visitors that maybe get them thinking, this place is getting on and has all the amenities that I want, I might settle here. So how do you think you can harvest people in Tamworth?
Look, I think our challenge, particularly with the Country Music Festival, is fantastic, particular time of the year. Although last year it was delayed and held back to a different time of the year, so we had a different type of sort of festival goer attend, a lot more families with younger children. Whereas we found in the January time, it is quite hot for our town. Lots of people. I know when we first moved up here as a family, we happened to move here in the first week of country music, and I went and set myself up a PO box at the local Tamworth post office and said, look, can I get that text message you send me when there's something arrive? And they said, you don't need to worry about that. There's always parking except for this week. And so what we need to try and do is, make sure we've got regular events that, if we are enticing people to move here, that they actually experience the real Tamworth, not just the country music Tamworth, which is, thousands of extra people, up and down the high streets, thousands of extra people in the pubs and all the rest, which is fantastic for the town, but it's not the real town. And getting people to come back on a more regular basis to see what we do have to offer, and showcasing that we do have professional services, we do have high grade engineering, robotics, obviously we've got the transport hubs now coming online. That's what we need to be showcasing, so that people, when they do come here, one, aren't overwhelmed with what happens during Country Music Festival, but then aren't disappointed when they do come and realise that, no, we are actually a normal regional town without the extra 10, 15,000 people on your doorstep.
I think most people would appreciate that it's like Parks and the Elvis Presley tribute that goes there. I mean, that place is just swamped at that point in time. But I think most people realise, well, that's not all year round, and it's not a bad place to visit. And if you ever get sick of the Elvis Presley, then you can always go and sit out under the park's telescope for a bit of peace and quiet with the sheep.
Bill, we have a very proactive approach to growing our region through an event strategy. So internally, our council put on 5 major events per year, and the major one is Rocky Nats. That's our car festival event, and that happens across Easter. And this year we had 57,000 attendance at that event, and so every single room is filled. We actually do an Airbnb drive to get. We actually target those empty nesters that have the 4 spare bedrooms to put those on Airbnb, just so we can get more people into our region. So in the last 12 months, we had about 580,000 visitors come to our region, and they spent about 416 million. So those visitors, when they're here, what we do is we work collaboratively between our event and our tourism team. This is internal at Advance Rockhampton, and we build blogs about the best way to live like a local. And so we tell them all the little Instagrammable spots. We tell them the best cafes. We tell them all those nature hikes, whatever the attraction that they want to find, they can find that. We build that through our Explore Rockhampton site, explorerockhampton.com.au. And what we want to do is we want them to fall in love with our region. We want them them to become little ambassadors and win their hearts and minds, so that that event that they come to, maybe they'll choose to come back here when there's not an event on. Maybe they'll choose to move here, and that giving those visitors a slice of what Rockhampton or regional Australia has to offer through an event attraction like Rocky Nats or like Beef Australia that we have next year. That's every 3 years. So there's over 100,000 people that come to that event across the week. You know, those events drive people here, and a lot of them, it's the first time they've ever been here. And so they get to experience our wonderful region with fresh eyes, and they get to, you know, I'm always interested in what people love the most. And so the thing that comes back from a lot of people when we do all our IER and data reviews, you know, they love the people, they love the actual country hospitality. A lot of people tell me how much they love how pretty it is, the drive from the airport to our CBD. And we've got this longer stretch of heritage listed buildings along that riverfront. And like, I work on the riverfront. Like I walk past these buildings every day, and I try not to take it for granted, but some days, you know, that's the highlight. That's the thing that will get people to move back here. It might be the beauty of those old buildings, or, you know, the natural wonders of our treetop Newham circuit. And events play such an integral role to that visitability that then turns into that livability.
I think with the air travel is important, that connection that allows people to get to and to a long distance in a short time, and then be able to pick up a car and savor the area. That's critically important. But I also think we probably need between Brisbane and Cairns, we need that interconnectivity between the townships, so people can go and have a nice planned trip where they can spend a few days here and a few days there and savor all things at any time of the year. And I suppose that's the same with Tamworth. You want people to come out of Sydney and Newcastle. Yes, come to Tamworth, but the thing is, what there needs to be is an interconnection where people can see, I can do a leisurely trip from Newcastle into Tamworth and the other surrounds and Armidale or whatever, and I can do a loop around for a couple of different towns in the car travel. Because let's face it, in a lot of Australia, like if you're coming out of Brisbane, that is a bloody long way to Rockhampton to push up there and do a stay there. So we do need that interconnectivity between the different regions, so people can have that sort of safe leisurely trip, and also have like a fly-in fly-out experiences as well. In Tamworth, what's your connection, say, to Sydney? What would be the most sort of let's do a trip, a roundabout trip, say do a loop or something? What would sort of a loop you would envisage for a person coming up from Sydney to do a loop that included Tamworth?
So I've just actually come back from Sydney today. That's why it's a little bit late. It's a pretty direct trip, Sydney towards Newcastle, but you bypass Newcastle onto the Newcastle Express, through to Singleton, Muswellbrook, and then Scone. It's probably, then you're basically up to Tamworth. Then to loop back, you can either go over the coast, where you then, towards Dorrigo, then back down the coastal way, or further out west, and back over the ranges that way, through Merriwar, back through to places like, well, I've done it before, where I went through to Dubbo, and to Orange, and then back down the Blue Mountains. But it's a fairly I drove down to Sydney on Tuesday morning, attended an event last night, and then drove back again today. It's about a 5.5 hour trip down there and back again, but you're effectively on the one road the whole time.
Well, that's unfortunate, but I suppose it is a sort of a plan that can be looked at. I know up in Cairns, a lot of people come to Cairns and they want to go up to the tip, and basically it's you get into Cairns, and then you get on the PDR, the Peninsula Development Road, and you go up the centre, and you're still a long way out from Weaver and that to keep going up north. And then the thing is, you've got to come straight back the same road, and if you want to go elsewhere, it's drive out and then drive back into the PDR. But there is now a serious look to making a bit of a loop around to so you can get a good picture on the west coast, get up to the tip, and come back on the east coast, and you have a bit of a triangle, and people can leave Cairns, go to the tip, and when they come back, they can go and end up over at Normington and things like that, so they don't have to loop back through Cairns. And I think that'd be very attractive for probably not the day trippers or the week or the general holiday makers, but it would definitely be something for the grey nomad. So what about Rockhampton? Is there something where we can get looping sort of things like that, where we can get these visitors to stay in the region a little bit longer than do those circuits?
Yeah, so Bill, our Rocky Regional Council owns our airport. So in the last financial year, it saw about 580,000 passengers through it. It was serviced traditionally from Qantas, Virgin and Alliance, plus some charter work with Skytrans as well. But earlier this year, we welcomed the addition of our first low-cost carrier with Bonza coming back in. And so that opened up a few more connections with Cairns, Townsville, Sunshine Coast, Melbourne as well. And later this year, they've announced those Gold Coast flights as well, which are for sale now. I suppose in the tourism land, they call it open jaw. And so, creating these loops, one thing that you have to consider is, regional Australia is really strong with fly drive. We talk about connectivity and accessibility from the airport to the different attractions in a region. A lot of our regions in regional Australia are fly drive. And so you could fly in and then you hire a car. What would be amazing, and what is amazing when it happens, is if a car company will let you hire from one location and drop off to the other location without penalising you, thus creating a loop. And when stakeholders work together to create that open jaw plan where you're not penalised for flying into Rockhampton and then hiring a car and driving back down to, say, the Fraser Coast and flying back out that way, when it's a proper collaborative itinerary, that's when success works, and you're not penalising that consumer for what would be the best way to experience a wider region.
Okay, gentlemen, look, we're coming up to the hour. And we'll sort of get back onto the Bush Summit topic in regards to what plans does each of your locations have to sort of keep any momentum created by the Bush Summit going with the individual contacts, and maybe looking to push out into other areas and other contacts that those contacts would provide you with? Matthew, would you just like to start?
Sure. Look, our one, so probably the medium term here for Tamworth is definitely the renewable energy zone. So it's making sure we're following up the discussions with those, and it was very much apparent in the Bush Summit, the requirement to have more community consultation about what is happening, where it's happening, and consultation about any changes that need to happen. That's something that we already knew was on our local agendas anyway. So definitely now following that through with both the state and federal politicians, and then where necessary, obviously the water infrastructure component here locally. We had Rose Jackson was up here as part of the Bush Summit sort of grouping, so she had some good meetings with our council in terms of what can be done locally. So just following up a lot of those conversations. A lot of them already were happening, but the Bush Summit brought it all together so that they realised that other people were talking about the same issues basically.
Zach, what's on for Rockhampton and the follow-up?
Bill, for us, the Premier announced $160 million worth of boosting. Now, not all of that was for Rockhampton. A lot of that was across the state. But, you know, our team are always speaking with both elected members and the different departments that funding goes across. So we continue to have conversations around, you know, what that looks like. One of the exciting ones was the Back in the Bush Communities Fund, which included $10 million for local councils to fund community projects that benefit locals and visitors as well. So, you know, really exciting to see what opportunities lies there. And we were lucky to have, you know, about $90 million announced to rebuild a mental health a department here, and that's a 31-bed mental health facility to add into that additional one. So that was the largest monetary announcement for the Queensland Bush Summit here in Rockhampton, and that was for Rockhampton. So, but yeah, all of those, they just enter into our conversations that we have, you know, with all of our elected members and you know, DDGs at those different departments.
Well, I suppose it's just a matter of persistence come every budget time, both federally and state, to get your message across and hopefully focus on some big wealth creating projects. But it's still disappointing in regards to Tamworth, the water projects not going ahead in regards to guaranteeing water security. And I think that's an issue right through a lot of regional Australia, even Cairns. You know, you're talking about a city that they want to grow, but we're not getting the guarantee that we're going to have that water security. And that conversation looks like it's decades away in regards to securing that another dam or something else that's going to fill that position. Do you think maybe, I mean, obviously the Bush Summits are going to be in different locations next year. I think they've been going since 2019, so this is the 4th year, and they do the rounds. Do you sort of look at the idea of keeping a view of the next Bush Summit that's on, and having conversations with the new townships that are going to be featuring in that, in regards to passing on your experience of Bush Summit and say, well, these are the things we did, and maybe you may want to look at something different to get a better result, or this got a good result?
Look, my takeaway from it is, you know, recognition that it is a News Corp event. It's not a state government event. It's not a federal government event. It's an opportunity for News Corp to engage with the towns. You know, bearing in mind that, you know, they're not the local publisher here in Tamworth, although, you know, there's a lot of readership here. But recognising that, you know, they've set the agenda, they've set the topics, they've chosen the presenters, and, you know, recognising that. I mean, I wasn't expecting a huge, you know, I mean, our state government here in New South Wales is still reviewing everything because they've only been in since March. So we weren't expecting any major announcement from the state government at the Bush Summit, and we didn't get one. Similarly with the federal government, we weren't expecting anything, but, you know, it was great to have a lot of both the politicians and the team with them to come to Tamworth, experience what were both the positives and the challenges. And, you know, that I think if people were expecting some major big announcement, it wasn't going to happen on those meetings for us, because it didn't coincide with the state government elections, doesn't coincide with a budget expectation. So, you know, other than having conversations that were already being held anyway, it was, you know, a chance for, you know, businesses to showcase what they could do, more so for the media than the political circles. And I know that council and Tamworth, you know, we showcase what we can do as a region, how many people we can, you know, bring into town and show off what we do, both from the sporting precinct, from the you know, various different events we hold locally, that was what it was all about for us.
And, you know, for Rocky, echoing those sentiments, this was a really great opportunity for conversations to happen here on country, and using News Corp as an incredible platform to get those, you know, conversations heard. We also had the benefit of having, you know, our Premier come in and make some really great announcements as well. But, you know, to Bill, to answer your question, wherever it's being held next year, you know, I'm very open to have discussions with that city or town around, you know, what we found worked. But I think for, you know, for us, we had such a, and do have such a great relationship with that News Corp event team, that there was no, you know, everything was very clear with how it was going to run, and you know who the presenters were and the style of the day. So they were really good in delivering that event here in Rockhampton.
I think the most important thing is in regards to News Corp and its reporting in that is we do have, we're fortunate, at least Cairns still has a newspaper and Townsville has a newspaper. Rocky lost its paper not long ago, same with Mackay. But they do have some reporters that are very on side with regional Australia and sort of pushing the barrow, the importance of the state, the regions, what they produce, what they can produce, what potential they have. I think it's an opportunity to, I suppose, to keep fostering those relations with News Corp so that they continue to keep the message out there that and I'd like to see a change, that the regions are not just your backyard. They are potential powerhouses for the nation. And I think I'd like to see that message from News Corp a lot more often, rather than here's the Bush Summit and this is your beautiful backyard. I'd like to see a more powerful message in regards to the region, and maybe even some sort of change in the tone of that in regards to well, we just aren't your backyard. We're your future. The only place
just to correct, sorry. News Corp still does have a presence here in Rockhampton. They just don't have a printed paper, but there's about 5 journalists that live here that report on local stories, both from a social digital point of view.
Yeah, there's, and you also got actually a hard copy. Is there central newspaper?
Today. Yeah, so they do a printed run every Wednesday and Saturday.
Yeah. So you still got that, but there again.
We've got ACM owns the Northern Daily Leader and a number of different sort of presses around the Tamworth region. So I mean, as a chamber, we have a relationship with the ACM team more so than obviously News Corp, but then, you know, on the TV side, the NBN and Channel 9 and Prime 7 here locally. So we don't have a huge News Corp presence, but, you know, listening to the presenters and the team involved here, they were definitely well researched, and they knew who was who locally, and they knew which businesses and what the topics were. And so we've got more of a link to ACM as a regional publisher, and then locally with Prime 7 and NBN more so than anything that's associated directly with News Corp.
Okay, gentlemen. If there's anything you'd just like to wrap up on a final note, I mean, I would like to. We do have some really good journalists who really highlight the difference between the regions and the potential for regional. So hopefully we can keep fostering that message out there and encourage them to put that message across more and more often. Okay, gents, if you can just stay on the line, I'll just wrap the show up and announce the next show.
Yep, thanks, Bill.
Thanks very much, time, Zach and Matthew, for your time. It's really appreciated. If you enjoyed this show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook channel, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our next episode will be with Russell Broadbent. He's the federal MP for Monash, and we'll be talking about the Ministry of Truth. It's just not 1984 fiction. If you could join me then, thanks very much.